Welcome to the 2022 mid-season recap here at this 14th season, Blood, Sweat, and Beers. I am your host and your commissioner, Adam Gabarty. Let's take a look at the top headlines around the league here in this first half of the season as we look back. The most notable is that the East is a powerhouse this year. Typically not the case. Historically, the West has had most of the power. It has most of the original team members and a lot of history there. Typically in the East, we see new teams, we see new league owners. But this year, it's quite a bit different. The East boasts three top scoring teams in the league. And all but one, according to Wilson, have a 64% or better chance at making the playoffs. Pretty significant. Led by the rookie sensation Beer Goggles. Again, not exactly sure where he came from. I think saying that he was a Bears fan probably was to try to throw us off, maybe to discount him right off the bat. Clearly, he's a force to be reckoned with. A couple of interesting things to note. At this point, the East Division could potentially send all 5 teams to the playoffs. Now, that has never happened in the history of Blood, Sweat, and Beers. It's been close a couple of times. The league or a division may miss it by one team. But with 6 open spots and one gives way to the top seed in the other division, it's quite possible that the East could look at sending all 5 of its teams to compete for that championship. So that'll be interesting to watch through the second half of the season. But I mentioned that rookie sensation that's leading the way over there in the East. It's a tight race. No one's breaking out, but no one's really fallen that far behind. But it should be noted that no full season rookie has ever won the championship in the Blood, Sweat, and Beers League. Now, we'll touch on that later as we talk about the Black Baby. But no full season rookie has ever won the championship. Some have made it to the championship game, only to fall just a little bit short. So we have some interesting things to take a look at. In other news, Keith continues to be an absent champion, disappointing the majority of the league by not taking full advantage of his name-changing rights for Poncho. Not just rights. Now, dare I say responsibility for changing that name at least monthly, if not weekly. He's been content to just let Brady's ladies ride, which sounds like might be the case in real life for a soon-to-be bachelor and his likely entourage. Also, in one of the worst tumbles in recent memory, the fantasy football team has dropped an astounding 7 spots in the final projections since draft day. That's probably historic if somebody were to spend the time to go back and look at that. But once heralded as the most likely champion come January, that team is now mired in quarterback controversy, open arguments between players and coaches during games, and just an observed general lack of enthusiasm for the game. It's a sad state of affairs there in fantasy football land. On the plus side, the team might end up with an actual team name come next year, should they fall just a few more spots come January, at the hands of whomever does wear the crown in January there. Unless it's Keith again, who will probably just pick something lame and then forget to change it later. All right, time to pay some bills. We'll be right back.
Source is not affiliated with Blood, Sweat, and Beers in any way whatsoever, and I do acknowledge being featured as a sponsor of today's program.
Welcome back. I'd like to take a few minutes to address another elephant in the room, or rather, the Black Baby in the room. Things can happen very quickly on the fantasy football chat. We have a lot of very witty, very smart personalities, and a lot of times the zingers, the back and forth can really start to add up. There may be dozens of comments before you may have an opportunity to try and catch up, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, leaving some of us to feel very much like Keith, confused and tired. So as we think about the origin story of Eli Manning's black baby, let's take a step back. I want to give you just a little bit of context. The year was 2012. One of the founding members of the Blood, Sweat, and Beers Fantasy Football League had recommended and invited an in-law to fill a vacant spot. That in-law was prompt in responding to the email invitation to sign up, but was never seen or heard, not once. And so as draft day approached and arrived, the league had to group draft. We had to draft for him because he wasn't there. And then we watched the first several weeks go by, and there was zero roster management. Inactive and injured players were left in the lineup, making it very clear that this particular team owner was not engaged at all, for whatever reason, but also not responding. So the league felt, after about a month, that it was time to make a change. So the first thing we did, we booted the owner. We changed the name of the team, Ghost Protocol, as a nod to the fact that we were ghosted by the original team owner. And we invited our very own Aaron Chanka to take the reins and to run with it and see what he could do. Impressively, Aaron won the championship that year. He is still the only rookie, not a full season rookie, but the only rookie to have won a championship. Aaron enjoyed some success in the early years of him joining the league. A couple of years later, in 2015, he won the championship again, joining only John as a two-time champion in the league. We now know those gentlemen as Glow Wasps. But it would be a little bit of time then before Aaron felt like he was successful again. In fact, 6 years went by, and he barely had a whiff of that former glory. And so last year, Aaron felt like it was time for a change. He needed something different. He needed a new name. He needed something unique, something personal, something different. When I asked about the new name, Eli Manning's Black Baby, you do a Google search on it and you really find nothing. So it's not a real obvious connection or reference. Here's what he said. He said, "It became clear to me that I needed to rebrand and create an identity that was truly my own. So I was inspired to adopt a team name that was potentially offensive and racially charged." You have indeed, my friend. You have indeed. But he doesn't take the credit for the new moniker all on his own. In fact, a series of poorly punctuated boasts and confused replies really spiraled into the name that he has today. We've actually acquired a series of messages that were sent in the Blood, Sweat, and Beers football chat on WhatsApp to give further context to where this name came from, how this odd nickname, what gave birth to the baby. It appears as though Keith was attempting to make the comparison of his own team, who performed poorly in the regular season, but somehow went on a run in the playoffs and won the championship, to the Giants quarterback Eli Manning, who has in the past been accused of stumbling his way to a championship. Keith declared in the text that were provided to us, "Just call me the Black Eli Manning, baby." Having missed a crucial grammatical element in that sentence, the league was left to wonder, when did Eli Manning have a black baby? Eli Manning might not actually have one, but the Blood, Sweat, and Beers Fantasy League certainly does. Our next segment on the program today is brought to you by Meets and Bounds. Home valuations got you down? Pick up the phone. Call Meets and Bounds. Today we're going to take a deeper dive and we're going to look at the league by the numbers. So a couple of interesting facts, some statistics to keep in mind, things that really have no bearing on the second half of the season, but I just wanted to share. We've never had back-to-back champions in this league in 14 years, despite a lot of unfounded confidence every year from the previous year's winner. In fact, reigning champions don't do so well in their follow-up season. We know in football it's tough to repeat. Things just have to line up. It's even harder when you start from scratch every year. But if we look back since 2010, in fact, not since our second year, has any previous year winner finished better than fifth overall. Early on, we had one anomaly, and since then, it's fifth or worse for the previous year's champion. In fact, the overall final standing average for previous year winners, sixth place. So, it's quite a hurdle to overcome. It is a mountain to climb. At the moment, our current reigning champion, Keith, is bucking the trend. He is fighting history, sitting at third currently. We'll see if he can maintain that over the course of the second half of the season and potentially into the playoffs. History is not on his side. Just something to keep in mind. And a lot can be said about the points that are scored against you in fantasy. We know that we start a defense, but our defense doesn't have anything to do with the team that we're playing. They don't actually prevent that other team from scoring points. In fact, our defenses are point scorers, so they're essentially another part of our offense. And yet, unfortunately, what happens on the other side of that stat sheet has everything to do with whether or not we win or lose and where we stand at the end of the season. Unfortunately, we can't stop a team from scoring points against us. All we can do is try and score more points than them. Historically, winners in the league have some of the fewest points scored against them. Now that may just seem obvious, duh. But think about that for a minute. It's not just the team that you put together, but it's the team you play every single week. So think about this. 3 times in the 14 years that we've been playing, 13 years, we don't know what's going to happen at the end of this one. 3 times the league champ had the fewest points scored against them in the league. Fewest points. Only once did the league winner have more points scored against them than most other teams. It was the Hogs in 2016. In fact, he came in 9th out of 12, almost towards the end, having the most points scored against him. That is an anomaly. That's an outlier. He was also he scored the most points that season, so he was able to balance that out. Historically, league winners are ranking, on average, less than 4th of fewest points scored. They're in the top 3 or 4 teams that have the fewest points scored against them. How do you work that out? You can score points. You can manage your roster. How do you figure out how to have the fewest points scored against you? Because that seems to be the most consistent thing about our winners over the history of our league. Something to think about. But we know that you have to score points to win. You can't just rely on people to not score points against you. In fact, our current number 1 seed has the fewest points scored against him. He is also scoring points. Let's not take that away from him. But people just seem to fall down when they play our current number 1 seed. So will that continue in the second half? Is that just statistically the way it is the first half? We'll have to keep an eye on that. And at this point, the most points against a team goes to our current number 9 seed, second to last fantasy football team, who's on pace to have a historic amount of points scored against him. Last year, the high water mark for points against was set by read option at almost 100 or just over 150 points a game. He complained a lot last year. Well, fantasy football team is currently averaging 155 points against. So you can score 182 points, and sometimes it doesn't matter. Just, again, something to think about. Well, that will do it for our mid-season wrap-up here for 2022. Appreciate you spending the time. As always, play safe, play smart, try not to always play with yourself.